Do you have a lot of scraps that need to be organized? Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, welcome to Karchermakes. I'm Andrea, a serial crafter coming to you from South Central Pennsylvania, where we like to do all things crafty, primarily knitting and crochet, sometimes spinning, sometimes weaving, sometimes other things, and this is where we talk about it. Welcome. So for today, I really want to talk about organizing leftovers. Leftovers, scraps, mini skeins, advents, all of that. So I have these jars here, and a couple folks left comments, and I got some messages on Instagram about them and how I kind of keep things organized in them. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to just make a video about it, and we can all share our ideas down in the comments below. If you have ideas about how we can better kind of keep organized, keep everything together, use up our scraps, all ears, please leave your feedback in the comments below. Let's talk about it. So before we get into the how I organize portion of the program, let's really talk about using the yarn itself. So the way I kind of think about my yarn is that I have a primary project that I want to make. And then from that, I have some leftovers. And then I try to use those leftovers in various scrappy projects. And then I really have the scraps of the scraps, if you will. I still want to use those though. I know some folks like to give them away, swap, and I've done that before too. Like just had swaps with people where we're swapping out our scraps so that we can get new shiny scraps. But for the most part, I like to use up all the yarn, every last little bit. And I do use a lot of fingering weight yarn, a lot of sock weight yarn. So I end up having a lot of leftovers there. But first, let's kind of talk about that. So I have a primary project that I want to make. When I buy yarn, there's something I want to make with it, typically. I try not to buy yarn for the sake of buying yarn, although I've been known to buy yarn just because it's pretty. But I do like to at least have an idea of what I want that primary project to be. And typically it's socks or a shawl, but sometimes it might be a cowl or a hat or, you know, a sweater, or in the rare event, a sweater. But I really have this primary project in mind that I want to make. From there, I have some leftovers, and I do try to think about ways to use those leftovers in scrappy projects. And then once I do that, like I really have the scraps of the scraps, so the leftovers from the leftovers, and what can I possibly do with these tiny little bits of yarn? I have a couple projects in play there that I like to add those to, and ultimately what I want to end up with is no yarn left over. But in the meantime, I have to have a way to store it so that I can find it, so that I can see it, and like it's a journey. It's a yarn journey. So let's talk about that journey for a second. I have this skein of yarn here. This is a full skein of 80/20 super wash merino nylon, 400 yards, 100 grams. It's from one of my faves, Rising Tide Fiber Company. Hashtag not sponsored. I just really love her yarn and her color aesthetic. This color just happens to be Catalina Wine Mixer, which, look, I have the humor of a 12-year-old boy, so the movie Step Brothers is my jam, and I had to get this when I saw she had it. But this is a full skein of yarn. Now, there's a lot of things that you can do with a full skein of fingering weight yarn, and again, going back to how I think about like what I want to do with it, like there's a primary project and then I have to deal with all these leftovers. So let's use this as the example. But this is a different color of the same yarn. This is called Look to the Rainbow. And again, same yarn from Rising Tide Fiber Company, just a different colorway. This yarn has been in 5 projects, I think, and I still have some left. So let's just chat through that real quick. Starting off with the primary project. They were socks. This pattern is called the Mountain Socks by Rachel Nunning, and it just has a nice little texture. I made these when I was on vacation last year, so it's also kind of like a souvenir project for me. But yeah, so primary project, socks, check, got that. Now, with those leftovers, now I have to do something with them. So, scrappy project number 1, scrappy socks. Scrappy socks are a great way to use up your leftovers. It's really easy. Obviously, a vanilla sock is highly modifiable in terms of color, right? You can do probably 25 stripes if you wanted to, since that's usually how, you could probably even do more, like 50 stripes if you wanted to. But it's a super easy way to use up leftover yarn, and you can see that color makes an appearance here in these socks. So there's a second project that I used that same yarn for. Third project is, and you guys have seen this, if you're not new here, you've seen this several times. Log Cabin Square, the patterns from Very Pink Knits. And this little section here is where that yarn appears. And this is about 4 grams. I'm not sure on the socks how many grams they were, but this is about 4 grams of yarn here. Again, this is a fantastic project for leftovers. I love it. This is one of my favorite projects that I've probably ever done. So yeah, makes an appearance there. And then I really had, at that point, maybe 7 or 8 grams left. So if you've been following for a little bit, you know I'm obsessed with this End Times cardigan by Amy Young Gunderson. So of course I had to use the leftover there as well. That makes an appearance in a little tiny half triangle. And I've not measured gram wise what this is using. I would imagine it's definitely less than 2 grams. It may even just be 1 gram, but it's the teeniest amount. So it got used in here. And then next, one of the final kind of scrap of the scrap projects is my Battenberg squares. So I have probably at this point at least 150 of these. One day they'll become a blanket. It'll be talked about in my Forever Whips video, which is to be coming at some point. But so it gets added in there. And then the final stop, like the final stop for a yarn scrap, the tiniest little bit, the scrap of the scrap of the scrap of the scrap, it gets added to a magic knot ball. And this magic knot ball is attached to this corner to corner crochet blanket. And again, this is a super easy project to use up all of your leftovers. You will have nothing left. So there's that. So now that we talked about like the journey of the yarn, let's talk about the journey of the organization that needs to happen along with it. So let's start with how I organize minis and mini sets. So starting here in this basket, and these are just some basket bins that I've had for 20 years. These are all mini sets that I've picked up over the years. This one just happens to be from my Alaskan vacation. This is a mini Skeins set from Polka Dot Creek. This was their Pink Friday offering. Super fun colors in here. Love this one. A lot of just random mini sets that I've picked up. Some only have partial skeins left. A few skeins here and there. And then this basket is all single minis. So this one's from Miss Babs. This is from a prior advent from Fiber Nymph Dye Works, and I think this was one of the first ones that she did, and she hand wound all these balls, which is like amazing. That's a lot of work. So yeah, this one is just all sorts of one-off minis. A lot of these I got from swaps with friends, and I just haven't gotten around to using them yet, but they will be used. They will be used. Some of these are like super old, by the way. I fell in love with mini skeins when I first started knitting and started collecting them nearly immediately. So a lot of these dyers, such as this one, Marigold Jen, doesn't even exist anymore, which is really sad because I really liked her colors and her dye style. But, you know, some people move on, and I still have the yarn to show for it. This was my first purchase from Frogget Yarns. I found them at the Apple Harvest Festival in Pennsylvania, and this was one of my first purchases, this little tadpole from them. Super cute. So I try to keep all of the one-offs contained in this basket, and then more of the sets contained in this basket. And then if we move over here, and by the way, these live downstairs in one of the cube shelves that I have. So then here in this small jar, and I broke the lid to it, which is why it doesn't have a lid, these are all of the self-striping leftovers from my year-long Desert Vista Dye Works knit along. One of the prizes that you get at the end, or that I got at the end, was this mini skein set, which, you know, I love. I love a mini skein set. So I just have that kind of separate in here with the self-striping and Desert Vista Dye Works leftovers. I do want to create something just out of these self-striping leftovers. So Karen Knits podcast, she's talking about possibly figuring out a cardigan, but using the jelly roll blanket pattern for it, which has me intrigued, especially with self-striping leftovers. So I keep all of those, again, kind of separate and organized since they're all one dyer. I like having that separate. I'm going to skip over these for a second. We'll come back to you guys in the ball jars. But this giant jar, again, broke the lid, don't have the lid, is basically a bunch of sock leftovers that are more than 20 grams. I kind of keep them separated by size a little bit just for organization purposes, but most of these are over 20 grams. This is a Rising Tide Fiber Company colorway called Jellyfish Jubilee that I used in like 3 different projects. Love that. So all of these kind of stay here in this jar. I like that it's clear. I like that it's something I can see. I can have my eyes on it. Don't forget about it. And yeah, so these are all kind of the big scraps, the big leftovers. And then once I use these down to the point where they're less than 20 grams, that's where these babies come in. That's where the ball jars come in. And these are half-gallon jars, 2 quarts. And these are the wide mouth version. I don't know if that really matters. I got the wide mouth ones because it's easier to just get my hand in and out of, but any jar will work. I know Balls of Twine on Instagram, I think her name is Angela, she used like these really pretty, like sleek aesthetic jars, which I loved, but I'm also a canner in my spare time and I have the jars on hand, so this is what I use. Use what you have. And so once I use up the leftovers, they become what I call a scrap of a scrap. Then they come to these ball jars, and I like to hand wind the balls just to keep them a little bit neater in the jars. They fit a little better in these smaller, again, 2 quart, half-gallon size jars. So I like to separate them by kind of color family, although I do have this one that's just kind of a little bit of everything that doesn't really fit in a color family very well. Mostly rainbow skeins, multicolor skeins, grays, and stuff like that. But I kind of have them in rainbow organization here. Purples, blues, greens, yellows, pinks, and reds. And that really helps me with being able to use these up. Again, I can see what I have. I can see the colors. I can easily pick out what I want to use. And again, it just makes it so simple and easy to be able to use it up, because ultimately I do want to be able to use up all of this yarn. Might not be today, might not be tomorrow, but eventually I have a goal to use all of these up. So I do have an exception to all of these rules, and it's really around the advents that I'm using for this current cardigan project. So what I'm doing there is have this bag that came with the advent from Polka Dot Creek, and I'm kind of keeping in Ziploc bags, which, by the way, I don't love using Ziploc bags. It's the plastic and all of that, so I really try to minimize using these sorts of things. But anyway, so I'm trying to keep these further separated based on what I've already used, because I want to try to not repeat a color in this. I want to see how far I can get without repeating a single color. So I'm kind of keeping those separate in these bags, organized by light and dark, just to make it easier for me. Again, these leftovers will become many, many other things. Socks, shawls, a blanket maybe. You know, the possibilities are endless. And if you need some ideas on what are you making? What do you make with all these leftovers? Hopefully you got some ideas here. I also have another video. It was around, right before the holidays that I posted, where there was a lot of ideas for advent patterns. Advent patterns work perfectly well for scrappy skeins. Honestly, any pattern can work well for scraps if you want it to be kind of stripy, multicolored, or you can collect enough of a single color and then kind of do a monochrome or a fade. Works well for that. So take a look at that video. Hopefully that gives you some ideas, and you too can make some beautiful projects with the leftovers. No need to go out and buy more yarn. Just use your leftovers. Like I said at the beginning, organizing does not come easy to me, and I do have to work hard at it, and I'm all ears for your best tips and tricks on how to better organize and stay organized with all the leftovers. So hopefully you found this helpful. Feel free to give it a like if you did. Subscribe to the channel for more, and until then, happy making.